Hi, everybody. It's Susan again, and I'm here to talk about the upcoming new moon in 0 degrees of Virgo. But before I do that, I just wanted to touch on our very beautiful transits of Venus and Jupiter that we've had over the last few days. It was exact yesterday. I'm doing this on the 13th of August. And on the 12th of August, we had the exact conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. And I just wanted to share my little blessing because this is what it can bring, blessings and abundance and good things. And it was on my moon at almost 12 and a half degrees of Cancer. And that was trying my sun, which is where my daughter has her moon. And my daughter is arriving later today from Paris. And my mother got news yesterday that she's being transferred to a much better facility for her. And it's closer as well, which means less commuting to me. And of course, the moon represents mothers. So I'm getting the mother dose, the mother load, as it were, in a very positive way, both coming through my daughter and my mother. So very excited about that. I hope things are working out for you in some small way, even despite some challenges overall that we might find in the bigger picture or maybe even in your actual life. And we're still in this phase now of the very, very close conjunction. It's a separating conjunction. So now what happens usually is that we start to ease off the excitement or the buildup that is about the applying conjunction, and we start to see the results. And this is the beginning of the new cycle of the Jupiter-Venus conjunction that I spoke about in another video. It's also squaring the moon as I'm doing this. So there's a square to the moon that is simply just adding to the energy of the Venus and Jupiter. And the moon is separating from its square as I do this. And it's also approaching a trine. So it's in what we call a waxing gibbous phase as it goes into almost its last quarter phase, which will be over the next couple of days, and then approaching this new moon. So let's have a look at that new moon. And before I do that, I just want to mention that I am doing these videos for you all. I love astrology. I know that it works. I see that every day with my clients. I've seen some extraordinary things even just in the last few days with what people are understanding about themselves. And that's why I do this. And it helps you to know that I exist, that I do the work that I do. I'm a consulting astrologer. This is the way I prefer to work with people, with actual people. I also am a real person. I am not an AI. And the fact that you have chosen to watch this video, of course, makes me very happy, but it doesn't give you the right to tell me how I need to show up. And you can't decide what I get to say on my channel. So the fact that you've chosen to spend your time is really your choice, and it's not something that I therefore owe you anything for. The thing about our society, especially, is that we have really a society of takers. And when we are taking a lot more than we are giving, it really reinforces a sense of entitlement. And that can lead to a lack of generosity and a lack of tolerance and generosity of spirit. Which it brings me then to this new moon in Virgo, which is very much about service. It's about living a life of service, and how you serve is going to show up in your chart in the house of Virgo or wherever Virgo is in your chart. And we'll look at that sign by sign as we go. Um, and when we don't live a life of service, now a lot of people don't like that word because it immediately flips them into a notion of being in servitude or the overgiving, which is the unhealthy aspect or the shadow aspect of Virgo, which flips into the sort of victim martyr dynamic of the Virgo Pisces axis, which is always the trap. It's always there. We just collapse into ourselves, our little egoic self, and we focus on the self-satisfaction, needing things to go our way. That's the shadow side of Virgo. Things have to look a particular way, or I won't be happy. I need you to show up for me in the way I want you to show up, or I won't be happy. And that creates an enormous amount of dissatisfaction and fussiness, and that's not a really helpful way to experience life. So proper service, real service, service that comes from the heart, especially as we have a Mercury in Leo at the moment ruling this new moon. that service is going to connect you to spirit, to humility, and that brings you peace. It brings you to a place of connection that is bigger than yourself, the little anxious self that Virgo can flip into when it's overly focusing on its own comfort. And at 0 degrees, which is where we have this new moon, this is where we have the purest expression of the symbolism of Virgo. That's always the pure expression of the sign. It's a kind of a fresh start. It's an emphasis on the qualities of that sign. And that's what we're working through for this next month. It's also where we find the fixed star Regulus, which is about majesty and integrity and power. So if we look at Regulus from the tropical zodiac, it entered into Virgo, 0 degrees of Virgo, in November 2011. And for 2160 years before that, so for over 2000 years, it was in tropical Leo, but it's still in sidereal Leo. And the way to work with the fixed stars, if you're going to blend them into a chart or into an interpretation, is to keep in mind the sidereal placements, because sidereal means stars, and working with the planets and the way that they work with our sun and the solar movement that we experience across the equator that marks the seasons for us in our perspective from the earth, is best to work with the tropical, in my experience. Again, everybody can do what they like to do, and you can have a different opinion, and you can have a different way of looking at even, the interpretations and how I read them. Interpretation by definition means that it's coming from a subjective experience and not from an objective or an actual experience of something that is immutable. And you can have a different opinion and not make it a personal attack. So just again to say that the Virgo quality of discernment also comes with a certain amount of decorum, and that was especially, we could say, especially true as Mercury in Leo is also about integrity and decorum. And so just keeping in mind the reason why you want to attack somebody or cut them down because you don't like what's coming at it. So that's more of an ish you rather than an ish me, as my kids would say. And anyway, we'll look at Regulus in a moment. I'll first talk about that moon, and the notion of Regulus, or the energy of Regulus, is really quite beautiful, and also very much ties into this overall sense of this new moon. So here we have the new moon itself on the 23rd of August. And that's my son's birthday, and I don't care if you think I talk about myself, and that's wasting your precious time. It's my son's birthday. I celebrate my son, and it's at 7:06 Universal Time. So I always choose Universal Time simply because it's the starting point for our calendar day, for the sort of the global time that we keep. And many of you are watching from all around the world. So it just makes sense that you can add or subtract according to where you live. And so this is a really interesting new moon experience because it's in a dynamic of square with Uranus, which is in Gemini, which is both of which are ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in Leo at this time. So Mercury is in a really interesting what can be called a mutual generosity. It's not a mutual exchange because there's no classical aspect between the two planets, but it's a mutual exchange, which kind of means that they're communicating with each other. They're sort of supporting each other as Mercury goes through the sign of the sun, and the sun is in the sign of Mercury. And the fact that Mercury is ruling both the new moon as well as the south node and the square from or the square to Uranus from the moon is really significant because it gives Mercury a lot of emphasis. And at the time of this new moon, it's picking up a lot of speed. So since the 11th of August, just before we had that conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, Mercury stationed direct again around 4 degrees of Leo. And it's picking up speed at this time, which tells us a lot about also the quality of where we're going. The speed of Mercury combined with the unpredictable or sort of insightful, changeable energy of Uranus in Gemini is also going to create a certain amount of friction, not just by square, but by the fact of these very, very different energies to this new moon in Virgo. So Virgo is an earth sign. It's a mutable earth sign. So the quality of Gemini is also mutable, and in some way that makes it helpful. But Mercury is in a fixed sign in Leo. And so there's something here about this kind of tension between what is possible and what is going to disrupt what we want to chug away at. So the focus of attention really is going to be this Virgoan service-oriented or health-oriented or pragmatic work-oriented quality. It can be, especially with that square to Uranus, a shock or a reality check. Some insight as well. It can also be very, very positive. Doesn't have to be disruptive or negative in that sense. It can be a disruption that makes us see things differently, or that causes us to open up to new possibilities, for example. So it's the thing about Uranus is it's a bit of a wild card. It's a bit like the South Node and North Node axis when we come up to especially the eclipse season that we're just now entering into with this 0-degree new moon. We're in a space of honestly just having to go day by day in this very pragmatic Virgoan way and do the thing we need to do without too much forecasting, without too much long range planning. Now, Mercury in Leo can be a little bit stubborn around what it thinks is true or necessary or needs to be, in terms of an opinion or an idea. So Mercury in a fixed sign can be a little strongly opinionated. It can be inflexible around ideas. And so there is this resistance, and it's coming from the ruler of this lunation and the ruler of Uranus. So we have to integrate that and understand something about where we might be resisting the new thing, resisting new ideas coming at us, resisting connections, because Mercury represents social connections as well. It can be siblings as well. The energy of Mercury is very strongly tied to friends and peer kind of relationships. And of course, the actual act of communicating. And this is where things can get a little dicey, because with that square to Uranus, this might upset some communications networks or communications sort of internet-y kind of artificial intelligence-y kind of things, where all of a sudden there's something new emerging, or it becomes more clear in our awareness around this time. And then that translates into the next lunar cycle, which encompasses the full moon of this cycle, this smaller cycle. And that encompasses this eclipse of the 7th of September. So where we have this energy of the dynamic, let's say, of the eclipse energy, I give it a couple of weeks on either side of the lunation that precedes the eclipse. That might be a little unconventional. You can start it from the lunation that precedes the eclipse. But I tend to go a little bit before that, because we're experiencing that energy. It's coming in other ways, depending on where other planets are aspecting. And especially because at this new moon, it is the very beginning of this cycle, which will end with a new moon and therefore begin the next cycle, which is going to be a total solar eclipse. So we have a lunar eclipse on the 7th of September, which I'll do a separate video for. And that lunar eclipse is at 15 degrees of Pisces, well, the Pisces and Virgo axis. And then we have the following lunation, the next new moon on the 21st of September, which is about this quality of the total eclipse that is still in this energy of Virgo. It's a different thing by that point, because no longer is there a square to Uranus, and by that time Saturn will be, for both eclipses, Saturn will be in Pisces, so in a sign-based opposition, and then for the 21st of September in a direct opposition to that new moon. And currently Saturn with Neptune, but especially Saturn is in a really powerful, what's called a quincunx or inconjunct from this moon. And that moon is being challenged not only by the square then to Uranus, but also by this quincunx, which is an inconjunct is uncomfortable. I often associate it with somebody who's driving in your blind spot and you know they're there, but you don't quite know how to maneuver around. Are they going to speed up? Are they moving, changing lanes? Are they going to back off? So there's just a sense of not really being able to take action directly when there's a quincunx, and the same sense of this looming need to act is kind of in the air here, as we have the Mercury in the fixed sign in the 12th house from the lunation. So there's this kind of a sense of I've got this thing brewing or percolating from within, but it's still not going to likely manifest or be comfortable, we could say, in some way, in terms of being outwardly taking action or working towards bigger action, probably until the 2nd of September, when Mercury moves into exactly that degree, the 0 degree point of Virgo. So we really are in this kind of phase of revving the engines. It's been part of this dynamic for a couple of weeks already, and we're creating something, but there's a little trepidation around what we're creating. So we want to use this maybe from a place of understanding that life is always a little bit like this. We think we have this fresh new start, things will change, things are moving on, things are going this particular way because we have this idea, that's the Mercury in the fixed sign, this is going to work like this is how it's going to be. And then the spanner in the works is this quincunx and this square. Requiring an adjustment, requiring some kind of change. So we've just had a sextile from Mercury to Mars, and now Mercury is moving fast, really quite fast, so is Mars, and they're separating from this sextile. And equally, we have these other sextiles, which are very important, have been important for quite some time already, and will be for much of the next year, essentially, for really about a year, as the Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto combination of this mini grand trine is also participating ongoingly as we go through this period of time. And that will back off only really in November, when Uranus backs into Taurus again, and already in September, October, Saturn and the Neptune will move into the end of Pisces. So we're still in this period of testing. It's like test driving, if we can use the blind spot metaphor again to think about ourselves driving, and we're maybe the GPS has stopped working. Even Waze is telling us the wrong way to go. And we're not quite sure. So there's a hesitancy here, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't embark on something. And the other more shadowy aspect of the Virgo quality, which is about purification and making oneself sort of clean and ready, let's say, for spirit to enter, or ready to be of service without the egoic desire, without the feeling of being put upon, without the feeling of being in servitude. Part of that, the shadow can be that there's this anxiety around perfectionism or doing it the right way. And we have this expression in English, which is perfect is the enemy of the good, or don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And Voltaire, the French philosopher of the 17th century, is the one who's credited with saying that. And in the French way, it's le mieux est l'ennemi du bien, which means the best or the better is the enemy of the good. And what's interesting to me, just always looking, whenever I note these connections and these expressions, I wanted to see what his chart looked like. And he has Uranus in Gemini. And I thought that was very interesting. He also has Jupiter in Leo, because at that stage, Regulus was on his Jupiter in the around the 26 degrees of Leo. So I found that really interesting, and how there's always this kind of energetic tie-in with the mood or the feeling of the vibration. And when you have Jupiter on Regulus, it's great accolades around wisdom and knowledge, and usually a lasting imprint socially. So So I thought that was really interesting. So we have this quality of just we have to get on with things. We can't sit in our corner and fret that the timing won't be right or I haven't got all the things sorted. We just have to kind of go through one step at a time. And Virgo being very much around healing and the dynamic of healing, Regulus itself it has a strong connection with Raphael, Archangel Raphael, which is about divine healing. And so this adds to this quality of what can be very healing. And then if we extrapolate from that notion of healing, we can say, well, there's this concept in dosage in medicine, which is about titrating. And we titrate in a way that it takes little baby steps towards finding the correct dose or finding the correct way forward. If you're titrating through a yoga therapy point of view, for example, or a physiotherapy point of view, where you're trying to get the body to heal itself or move in a new way, or relearn patterns, then you're taking the little steps to try and re-imprint some range of movement. And if it's about the dosage of a medicine, then you're adjusting as you go. How do I feel when I take this dose? How do I feel when I take that dose? What are the benefits? What are the consequences? So these are the things that we can do in our day-to-day life. It's kind of like where we can just keep going forward. And my dear friend Roisin, who we just saw with my astrology course a couple of days ago, um, she told me a couple of years ago this notion. She's a seer, she's a medium, she's a psychic, and her way of living is just waking up every day and saying, Spirit, where do you want me? What do you want me to do? So this is a form of titration every day. It's kind of like saying, this has a particular moment, and this is the quality of Virgo. It's this here and now, this moment, here and now, in a practical, earthly way. And it's about your daily routines and schedules. So it is very, very close to the present. And when we try and perfect or we jump into the future too far, we're losing track of the present, and we can't be here in the present. And as a result of that, you get this fear, this anxiety around doing things the right way because we're going too many steps ahead. And I think in these days, overall, collectively, 2025, 2026, and then in these particular moments of this period of August, September, where this axis of Virgo and Pisces is so strong, we really do need to take a sense, have a sense of this is this moment. And the next moment is guaranteed to be different, as it always is. It's just that we're doing this in a conscious way. Ideally, this is how we can go through this, right? So, with the Uranus as well, we have this capacity to be open to new inspiration. This can be very, very much so. The moon represents the mind. And when the sun and the moon are together, we can have this sense of initiating something based on a renewed sense of purpose. This is where I'm going to put my energy. This is where I'm going to put my body, in that Virgoan sense. And this is where I'm going to put my service. And this can come from something that inspires you really out of the blue. That's very Uranus. And this quality of how will I do it is also where we need to surrender with that South Node in Virgo, surrender to this notion of control and perfection and things needing to be a particular way. Whether it's the person who is telling you something on YouTube and you need to have that in a different way, it is, or whether it's your job, whatever it is, it's on you. That's up to you to control. It's up to you to take responsibility for how you engage with things. And that, the victim consciousness or the martyr consciousness of making other people responsible for how you feel is debilitating. And that's also feeding back into the anxiety loop. It feeds back into this feeling of powerlessness and stress and anxiety, which we want to avoid for sure. And that leads to procrastination, because as I was saying earlier, it's about this thing about perfection. It's slowing down the good enough. It's slowing down the capacity to just open the door and get out there and do something. And so here we're in a really interesting time, so this is an opportunity to look at this from the perspective of what do I want to build. It's an earth sign, and this is relevant for us for really these two lunar cycles, because it's not just this 0 degree of Mercury, but it's also the end degree, of Mercury ruled Virgo, but it's the end degree, the 29th degree of the Mercury ruled Virgo that will start the following lunar cycle. So two lunations, which are going to affect us very strongly. And if we go back in time, you can see a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on the lunar families and how they tie in. You go back 9 months, you go back 18 months, and you'll find the lunar family that corresponds to this early degrees of Virgo, usually 1, 2 degrees of Virgo where things began. This is now the next cycle of that. And then you go forward 9 months and again 18 months. And that's why, especially when there's an eclipse around these degree points, you really want to pay attention, because this, as we saw with the Leo moon in the last couple of weeks, there's an eclipse at the end of this story. So the eclipse cycle is very strongly tied to the lunar families and very often connects to eclipses. And this one also will be strongly connecting to an eclipse that will finalize a 3-year cycle coming in this September. At the 29th degree, it finalizes a 3-year cycle that began in that sort of similar degree within 1 or 2 degrees of the end of Virgo. So think of this as just the initial launching of something that is going to continue with this theme of initiation into next year, because as I mentioned earlier, we've got this mini grand trine here, very unusual aspect between Pluto and Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, that are all speaking in a way that is useful, constructive, harmonious if we're conscious about it, or can let things happen, let things occur in a way that we're not really participating in. Both can be true, and both are the response to these dynamics. We don't necessarily get benefit from a trine or a sextile. It's about how we're actually engaging with our life, of course. But this is the spirit of the times that we're in for the next 2 years. So think about this in terms of how you want to use the energy of your Virgo house at this moment, and how that's going to feed into the next year and a half or 2 over this longer period of time. And I'm just checking my notes. So expect disruption to your routines, to your work plans, because of that emphasis on this square to Uranus, and also the inconjunct between Saturn and Neptune. That can be where it's something you haven't really noticed, or it's not ready to be understood or dealt with until Saturn, Neptune move into Pisces. Saturn will be the first one to move into Pisces on the 1st of September, just before Mercury moves into Virgo on the 2nd. And so we can look at that dynamic in terms of finding the answer, or finding the better structure that will help us figure that out over the course of the later months of the year, and then into the first 2 months of 2026 really powerfully, because that's when we, of course, get Saturn, Neptune back at the 0 degree point of Aries and starting their new cycle in a very powerful way in February 2026. So lots of energy around the 0 degree mark. But even if you have, let's say 2.5 degrees of orb to 3 degrees of orb. So for Regulus, for example, there must be a conjunction within 2.5 degrees. For the new moon, the conjunction between 2 to 3 degrees, so let's call it 2.5 degrees, is appropriate. So that can take you from the last couple of degrees of all of the fixed signs, especially for the new moon reference, but only for Leo with reference to Regulus. And some of you, if you're born before 2011, so obviously you'd be very young listening to this, and you're very welcome, but most of us are born before 2011 watching this video now. And that would mean that we have Regulus in Leo at the last degree of Leo. So it takes about 72 years for the fixed stars to move 1 degree. It's a slow precession of the equinoxes, precession, meaning that they work their way backwards through the tropical zodiac. So remembering that there's 3 zodiacs. There's the tropical zodiac, there's the sidereal zodiac, and there's the constellations. And they don't always align. And the sidereal and tropical zodiac are right now about 24 degrees off. So sidereally, when we look at the stars or the nakshatras, for example, we're looking at 24 degrees back at this point, backwards into Leo. So it's about 6 degrees of sidereal Leo. I think that's it from the point of view of the moon. Oh, I meant to add as well that as we go with this service notion and this movement of the Virgo theme, the Virgo new moon, and that healing theme, which is Regulus and the divine healing that is part of the association with Raphael, Archangel Raphael, we can also reflect on whether our service is coming from the heart or coming from the ego, because both are true with the potentials of Leo. And so the guidance is coming from Leo here, with Mercury in Leo, because Mercury is ruling this new moon, is ruling this pesky, unpredictable quality of Uranus, bringing change, but that causes a little anxiety, causes a little disruption in the energy of Virgo. There are very different qualities, very different qualities of Mercury. And so they are difficult to associate. They're difficult to merge, let's say. And so whenever we change or innovate or find new inspiration, it still requires some kind of adjustment. And that will be easy or not easy depending on your natal chart. It's not guaranteed that that's going to go smoothly for everyone, but it is the requirement of our times. So I just want to briefly touch on Regulus before we move into the sign by sign. And it's the meaning Regulus, the meaning of the Latin name Regulus is the little king, and it's the central themes of Regulus as king, as the regal one, are leadership, prestige, and the capacity to radiate, or in that Leo quality, to serve from a place of wisdom or a place of superiority, but not in terms of an egoic superiority, but in terms of a bigger vision or a better perspective, let's say. In the Indian cosmology, this is Magha. Magha Nakshatra is the powerful one. It's the illuminated one. And so Regulus is 50,000 times brighter than our sun. Of course, it's way far away. So we don't notice that, but that's why we can see it so easily in the sky. And if you do have access to a nighttime sky, it's a really beautiful way of also appreciating the impact directly of the stars at at any period of time, but especially at this new moon. Because you can track where it is with reference to the new moon in the sky. If you have, again, I mentioned last time, these apps where you can look into the different placements, or check out an ephemeris if you don't have the apps to visualize that. I use Pocket Universe. There's a lot of other ones. It's just the one that I keep going back to. And I don't get anything for saying that. It's just that I use it. Yeah, and so it is considered to be the regal star. It's one of the 4 major stars that originally marked the cardinal points. So 2,500 years ago, Regulus was at 0 Cancer, and it was part of the, Fomalhaut was at 0 Aries, for example, where it's currently at 0 Pisces, and so on. So it's in a different area of our local sky from the tropical zodiac perspective. Of course, it's not going anywhere. It's us that's moving around. And we're shifting in terms of our relationship to the cosmos. But it is bringing fortune. It brings good fortune. It brings auspiciousness, and it is considered to have the best qualities of both Mars and Jupiter. So that could be another way of saying divinely inspired action. And as we saw earlier with the notion of Raphael, meaning that sort of, healing through God or the divinity, the divine healing that we have, recognizing that it's not us doing it. We are not the doer. We are not the one that's healing. It's better to think of oneself as enabling the energy of love, of divinity, of spirit to come through us that allows the healing, for example. And so this emphasis on Regulus at this time can be seen as a call to service with practicality and realism that's baked into the Virgo quality there. And we'll look at that where Virgo falls in your chart. And I also just wanted to touch on the fact that it can also represent the fall of kings, especially because the sun is participating here, obviously, with the new moon. It means the moon and the sun are coming together, and that conjunction is happening on Regulus. In the case of the challenge from Uranus, it's also disruptive, challenging, and we've got the ruler of this in Leo. So there's something about leaders, about rulers, about people in positions of power, which will be disrupted. This can also have a quality of finding solutions to previous conflicts or to conflicts um, that feel intransigent, that are not changing. And so this can also be disruptive in that sense that there's a solution found, a way through. With Mars in a Venus ruled Libra, this can be part of the story here. It's of course, I would wonder, because we've got Saturn, Neptune retrograding, and because Pluto itself is also retrograding, and we also have Chiron in a square to Venus. Venus has only just squared Chiron at the time of this new moon. I would wonder if whatever peace were found, or some kind of discussion around, a contract for peace, I would suspect it wouldn't last, or it would require a huge renegotiation or reconsideration around terms, especially as of February 2026, when then Saturn Neptune come back to this place direct. So that's just my way of looking at that. Let's say I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket around that. And then surprising events around those world leaders can even go to the extreme of, this is the other quality, the difficult quality of Regulus, where there's a conjunction of challenging planets like Mars or Saturn, for example. There can be just as much in terms of prowess in military or prowess in responsibility and leadership as actual real debility around issues that are deadly, assassinations, for example, challenges to the individual in terms of crisis around death, or some major accident or major disruption at the end of life. And that, of course, ties into the heart. Heart attacks are part of that because it's Regulus, which is, again, referencing Leo in the heart, the notion of heart that is coming together with Leo. So Vladimir Zelensky has Saturn on Regulus, and Saturn is conjunct this Regulus. So when he was born, Saturn was in Leo, very strongly conjunct his Saturn in Leo, which is already considered in detriment. And then with Regulus, that's not an easy factor. And the fact that this is creating a trine from Chiron and this square from Uranus and to his Saturn is challenging. And then his North Node at the time of the eclipse is going to be where we find Mars. So he has a North Node in Libra. And when we come to the 7th of September eclipse, his Mars will be on his North Node. Rather, the transiting Mars is on his North Node. So I'd say he's there's some vulnerability there. I don't predict death, but it's definitely something that would make him vulnerable, at the very least, vulnerable to his position. And this is what we're seeing, where it's very, very quickly, things are shifting in a very quick way, where he's losing his shine, as no longer considered the Churchill of our times. So another leader, I'm afraid I have to keep mentioning this old boy, is Donald Trump, who has his Mars and ascendant on Regulus, which is where we get so much controversy around him, so much attention seeking, so much energy around this person, and so much bluster, so much effort. And, he's got his sun in Gemini as well. So there's going to be something coming through him for sure that will change him, that will affect him. The ascendant represents the person, the physicality of the person, and this is something quite significant. So watch out for those characters in the news. And that's it. I think that's all we have here for the global delineation. And what I'd like to do is start, perhaps I'll just start with Virgo, and we'll go around the rest of the chart and end up with Leo. If you don't mind, Leo, if your ego can take being the last one, we're going to bring you to the final conclusion. And so Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, this of course is happening significantly in your first house of self. There's a fresh new beginning in terms of how you see yourself, but also more importantly, your role out in the world. This is where we have the Uranus inviting you to think differently about your social status, about your potentially your marital status, potentially your career ambitions, and the way that you reach out into the world. And it can have something to do with your parents or parenting in some way. The notion of where you take your orders, as it were, in terms of what society or your parents dictate in your life, or not. There is maybe that Uranus means that you've really understood it's time to break free from all of that and free yourself up from a feeling of social pressure. You have an enormous amount of support coming through the Jupiter and Venus still co-present in your 11th house, where that was where the conjunction was on the 12th of August. Both really, really helpful in terms of what can bring you good fortune through the house of gains or the vision for your future, the way you see yourself going forward in life. But as Jupiter rules your 4th house of home, and Venus is ruling your 2nd house of money, as well as the 9th house of your vision that you hold for life, the way you believe, what you believe in, what you have a sense of. This is a really, really interesting time for you to set yourself up for the future. And your ruler Mercury is in the 12th house, where you can be learning something from what is generated from or inspiring yourself from within, through the unconscious or through sleep, through dreams, through lucid dreaming, through these kinds of ways of receiving information or collating information that is coming through in a way that can make you feel or reach out into your spirituality, so feel more connected to what is spirit, what is your way of manifesting that. You have the South Node in your 1st house, so that can also be part of that shedding of ways of being in terms of yourself, letting go of old ways of trying to control or judge yourself or be critical. There's some aspect of the quality that you're bringing into the dynamics around relationship, but even around your work and your sense of ambition, that is really, it's time to let go. And that you will see over the cycle of the eclipses that come through September and then again through next February, March. So we're in a really interesting time for Virgos. If you have a 0-degree Virgo, especially Sun, but even Moon and Rising, this is really significant for you. If you have anything at 0 degrees of Virgo, very significant for you, and this will be a very precious moment to really feel yourself moving into something else, and let that kind of open up to you. So don't try to micromanage and plan in advance what that's going to feel like, but really train yourself to be present and to receive what's coming. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's a time where you can let go of the forward control through the future or through what's next, and how to deal with that, and come right into what's happening now and what's the best thing for me to do now. And that will be the way to go forward. It's the little baby steps into every moment that actually are the guidance, and it's divinely guided. Right. So yeah, have a wonderful cycle here. I think your life is definitely changing over the next couple of months. And you will, especially if you have those very, very tight early degrees, 0, 1, 2 of Virgo, you will be feeling this quite powerfully. And that square to Uranus will be omnipresent for you basically until November. And then again, coming through April and onwards, you're going to feel that urge for everything to be different, this urge to show up in a different way. So if you're sensing that, but you don't know the direction yet, remember what I said in the introduction. You're just feeling your way forward. So make the most of that, and I will see you in the next video. And Libra, this new moon is happening in your 12th house, where you can get a lot of insights through your unconscious mind, or through understanding what your inner guidance, your spiritual guidance, or your spiritual connection is telling you, what you're learning through ancestral dynamics or spirit connection, whether that be what you might consider spiritual guidance. So you have Regulus in your 12th house. So keep in mind that Archangel Raphael is a very strong connection here with Regulus, and you might want to explore the meaning of Raphael and how you might work with that energy, especially in this particular moment. Your ruler Venus is at the top of your chart at this time, and that's bringing you great visibility, great benefit, real insights into your vision for your career, or your vision for how you interact socially. There's a lot going on there, so there can be this can be a beautiful moment of expansion into something new. And the 12th house also represents confinement or perhaps service within areas that are more like hospitals, clinics, possibly prisons, monasteries, working behind the scenes, doing research, this kind of thing. And this might be what you realize is inspiring you now, as Uranus is in the 9th house, changing your sense of what your purpose is. And both the new moon, your 12th house, and the 9th house are ruled by this Mercury, which is in your 11th house of your future vision. So there's something that you're understanding there, or that can come through a friend, through a conversation that you have with a social network. That's also the 11th house, which is the networks and associations you keep with people. The way that you connect with the world at large, what you might want to share. It's also the Mercury in Leo, which is quite bold and expressive and wants to have its moment on the soapbox, and you might find yourself actually being a messenger for something that is helpful to your friends as well, that is bringing something of you. You've got Mars in your 1st house, so you feel strongly activated to do something, especially in the dynamics of your relationships, but also in all dynamics which tie into the theme of this, which is more about finding peace and harmony and stabilizing, finding the best way forward through every moment, finding the best way forward through service, through being there for others. And Libra has a very strong quality of service. The trap is when you forget yourself, or you feel that you have no choice. That's because Pisces is on your 6th house. So yeah, it's a really lovely time for you, Libra, and it's part of how you're renegotiating the dynamic of relationships in general. So this might be about becoming aware of your overall dynamics of putting yourself down or putting yourself last, or realizing that you're overgiving, perhaps in a way to seek attention from others or to seek validation from others, and it's draining. It's not good for you. We have Saturn, Neptune in your 7th house, trying to create a new vision for relationship and boundaries with others. We have Chiron from that same place in a square to Venus. So there's something about the relationship dynamic that is struggling, or a part of your learning at this time, Venus being your ruler, and having this understanding of where you might be insecure around yourself or around the dynamic in relationship, and that will be affecting the Venusian quality of the moment. And then, of course, you've got the North Node in your 6th house of service and how you show up for work every day, or what you do in your day-to-day routine and schedule. And that's where you're meant to be putting something new, where something is changing there. And it ideally is based on this bigger picture of wisdom, where Jupiter is ruling that from your 10th house, and you've got a clarity around your aims and ambitions in your life, in your career ambitions, for example. So because this is angular with Mars on your 1st house and the Jupiter Venus on the 10th house, with Saturn Neptune as well as Chiron in your 7th house, you will feel this change. This will absolutely show up in your life in a way that feels significant in the world outside. So you will notice this, even though the change might feel hidden from you in terms of how you're processing it, or it might be where you're doing things behind the scene and preparing for something to manifest itself out in the world as you go through this particular cycle, 6 to 8 weeks. Or even the 12th house representing foreign lands, faraway places, distant lands, the connection with online things potentially as well, because we've got that Mercury in the 11th house. And then Uranus in the ninth, referencing something about foreigners as well, and traveling. There could be something there where you're inspired now to go in a new direction based on all of those things. So actually a pretty good time, I think, for Libra right now with the moon in Virgo. And Scorpio, the moon in Virgo is happening in your 11th house of groups and your vision for your future, what brings you fortune, gains, great gains. Again, that depends on your natal chart. It depends on the qualities that allow for great gains or allow for a sense of where you want to move forward. But this is a really nice energy because it's putting you in a place of, it's a sextile from your sign, which is where you can take action, reaching out from what you do and into the community or into your vision for your future, into your sense of how to engage with people, how to engage out there in the world. Something very, very different is happening because you anyway have the South Node there, and that's where you've kind of decided this is done. I'm not really into this thing anymore, or that vision for my life, that goal that I used to have doesn't really fit me anymore. And this could be a part of reassessing what's the next thing, where's the next goal taking you. Your ruler Mars is in the 12th house, so you might feel antsy at this time. You might not feel entirely comfortable. It can disrupt you in terms of your inner experience, or it can disrupt you in terms of your more internal relationship with self or spirit or even others in a more hidden way. There can be some frustration because we've got Saturn, Neptune, and Chiron in your 6th house, with Mars ruling that from the 12th. If you are in a sense or a state of feeling stuck or confined by either your work or by an illness or by something that requires time out, requires something to be revised, requires something to be done behind the scenes before you get out there. And so Mars is going to move through that 12th house and enter into your house. The last week of September. I can't remember the exact date, but it's like the third week going into the fourth week of September. So soon enough. And you will have this opportunity to then express all of this and do something about it, act upon it, and that will affect your 6th house of every day. So this is a theme that resonates very much with this new moon in Virgo. What do I need to change about my everyday? What do I need to change about my attitude towards control? What do I need to change about my dynamic of my health habits or my work habits or the way that I'm doing what I'm doing at this time? Venus and Jupiter are really supportive, trinal to you in a very lucky house, the 9th house. And that's bringing you some real upliftment. It's bringing you a sense of vision. It's bringing you a sense of purpose that may have been lacking for a little while or feeling frustrated. But it's a new cycle there too that just began about 10 days before this new moon, or nearly 2 weeks before this new moon is when the cycle really started to build up. So lots of newness around the vision that you're holding for life, around the vision of your sense of self. And of course, that depends on your natal chart. So Mercury is ruling this lunation, as well as Uranus in your 8th house from the 10th house. So something about your sense of what you need to do out in the world, how you communicate that, how you connect with people in relationships of hierarchical or other orientations like authority figures, or how you communicate to them, or how you are becoming a communicator. And that's also one possibility here, where you start to feel yourself you've got a message you want to relay in that 11th house way. You've got a message that needs to be expressed, and that's maybe through what you do every day in the actions, and it can also be through the expression verbally of what you do. So your 2nd house of speech and values and so on is ruled by that Jupiter in the 9th. And Saturn in your 6th house is ruling your 3rd house of communications and networking through the everyday local space, where the Mercury is networking in terms of groups that think like you, or people who share an idea, a concept, a vision for things that you want to involve yourself in. So it could be a really, really good time to get yourself going in that direction, where you really start to apply what you have faith in. Uranus is changing your relationship to what is mystical or behind the eyes in terms of your inner psychology, This is going hand in hand with the Pluto in your fourth, which is changing your sense of security on a foundational level. It's going to change your relationship to your family of origin, your lineage, your sense of what you need to feel happy. And Uranus is bringing you insights, really deep insights into how you operate behind the scenes. And all of which ties into the Saturn Neptune in your sixth house of healing and everyday life. And then, of course, the Pluto there too in a trine. So a really interesting time for you to really dream your life forward or envisage what it is that you want, especially with your ruler there in the 12th Scorpio. So make the most of it, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, your ruler is in the 8th house with Venus, which has been a really lovely quality for basically the majority of August up to this point. And now you have a new start in your 10th house of your ambitions, your sense of how you reach out into the world publicly. And it seems to be supported by something you've understood about an inner experience or about an overcoming or an awareness of pain, trauma, fear, and how you want to move through that. It might be about how you're sharing intimacy. That could be intimacy through conversation, through ideas, through sex, through psychological, a depth of understanding yourself psychologically that connects you, makes you feel more connected with others. And a very favorable time, very uplifting in that sense. It can be very favorable for financial gain, for inheritance as well. And that might also be what contributes to that sense of newness that's in your 10th house, where it's like, okay, this is possible now because I received this or because that came to me. And part of that is through a shift in the dynamic of relationships that is ongoing for you. It takes a process of back and forth between now and November, and then again into April next year, where you're going to be changing the dynamic of who you are and who you relate to and the quality of those relationships. So very, very dynamic energy, because this is angular. This is happening in the 7th house and also the 4th and 10th house axis, where we have the nodes and where the new moon is in the 10th. And so we can see that this will show up in your life. And this is part of the cycle that's moving forward. It's not necessarily on the 23rd of August that it's going to show up for you, but it's going to start this new cycle showing up. And of course, we have Mars in your 11th. So there's a big sort of emphasis on connecting with people, joining into groups, joining in the future, moving into a social bond with people. It's one of the things that makes Sagittarius really social, is that Venus is on the 11th house. And there's a lot of desire for connection, desire for meeting people. But it's airy, it's light, there's not much let's say permanence or depth necessarily, especially also with Gemini on the 7th. So it can also bring you a lot of benefit if you do move into social circles or participate a little bit more, or even take on a more leadership quality, leadership role. You've got Mercury in the 9th, trinal to you, and also with Saturn, Neptune, and Chiron trinal to you. There can be something that you've understood but are not yet ready to deal with in terms of where you want to go, maybe what you want to learn a bit more. Saturn and Neptune in the 5th house can be about students and education and what you're bringing through this life in terms of what you already know and ancestral knowledge. And with Mercury in the 9th, it can be with reference to particularly the father, especially because it's also in Leo for Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising. Mercury in the 9th can be some new way of thinking about the father or of understanding the dynamic of father. And the parents, of course, also show up in the 10th house. So a new start in terms of your relationship dynamic with the parents, as Mercury rules that 10th house, something that is being brought forward through your sense of purpose and your sense of where your faith or your belief or your motivation comes from is going to be brought out into that 10th house aspect. So that's a really lovely quality. It's a really nice dynamic having a moon at the top of the chart for you. And this will be repeated through the next 6 to 8 weeks. And over, of course, this longer cycle, well, we have the nodal axis here in Pisces Virgo until July 2026. So this is a big change for you. changing the dynamic also of home. Maybe you're recognizing with that Jupiter in the 8th house through perhaps a new bond with somebody that may not yet be permanently established, or maybe you're in the phase of questioning with the Saturn Neptune retrograding, or a new sense of what you are comfortable with or what you need, how you might want to go into sharing something, sharing intimacy, or sharing resources with somebody that can establish yourself in a new way around what is home for you, because the North Node is in your house of home, homeland, property, family of origin. So I think this could be a really beautiful, fresh, new beginning. And especially because the last couple of years have been pretty rough for Sagittarius, this would be a really good opportunity for you to really look at how you can show up in the world in this service-oriented way, not in a self-sacrificing way, but in terms of connecting yourself to the divine, which is also Mercury there in the 9th house, and asking for orders. What do you want me to do today? And show up in that way. Do listen to the introduction to hear more about that. Capricorn, this is happening in your 9th house, which is really lovely. It's very inspirational in the 9th house, where there's a great sense of meaning and purpose, a vision for what you're here for, and a sense of higher mindedness, especially with Regulus there. That has been very, very strong for Capricorn, especially since November 2011, the end of November 2011, when Regulus regressed back into Virgo from your 8th house, Leo, tropically speaking, and currently the ruler of that 9th house is in your 8th house. So there could be something that's around understanding things from your inner experience, your more psychological motivations, understanding family dynamics, what you've inherited through family, especially as Saturn, your ruler, is with Neptune and Chiron in your house of family lineage. Issues to do, sorry about my dog asking for food now, issues to do with where you've come from and where you want to go. This is very strong. Your exaltation ruler Mars is in the 10th house, so you're feeling very ambitious, feeling like you've got a desire to go somewhere, a desire to do something. And also with the ruler of that 10th house, Venus, in your 7th house, along with Jupiter, you're well placed to bond or connect with somebody in a way that allows you to go forward in this new direction. And of course, Uranus is in your 6th house, being squared by that moon from the 9th house. So the tension there may be how to adjust your work, or how to adjust or adapt to the everyday that is clearly changing for you in a big way. Uranus also trining Pluto in your 2nd house of values and money, earned income, possessions, and so on, as well as family. And so there's something here that is about where you're seeing yourself, you're visioning the life that you want, or you're sensing what you have faith in and what you're guided by, maybe your philosophy of life, for example, and how that's needing to find a new way through your day-to-day living, through the life that you want to lead. And that might come through a dynamic of relationship, that reorientation towards this new way of going out into your work, out into your career, out into your vocation, can come through the help of somebody that you meet, either professionally or a dear friend or a life partner, that can support that action, potentially around female, that can help with that. And Mercury in the 8th also can help you maybe open up to what is actually on your mind or on your heart at this time, where you really want to have a sense of what needs to be spoken, what needs to be expressed, so that you can maintain a certain level of intimacy. With Leo on the 8th, Saturn is very stoic. Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, is very stoic. And so it's not the easiest thing for Capricorn to be intimate. So this might be something that is actually going to help you move into this new direction that might include a new, more supportive way of relating. And Jupiter is in your 7th, trining that North Node that it rules in the house of communication, from the house of relationships. So that certainly will help you and play a new role there. So good luck with that, Capricorn, and I will see you in the next video. Uranus, this is happening in your 8th house, and that's very, very much to do with your inner experience of life, your psychological nature, fears, whatever might make you anxious around things that may not even be obvious to you. This can bring something to light, bring a new relationship to any of those dynamics. And that Uranian quality in your 5th house of self-expression can help open this up as well, where you overcome fear of judgment, you overcome your own judgment, you overcome any sense of limitation around how you can either share resources with others or bond with others, be intimate with others, be in your own process of connection to the mystery schools aspects of life, the way of divining life, especially with Regulus there in your 8th house, and recognizing that this is an opportunity for you to see with maybe new eyes how you want to reach out into a new relationship with the divine, if you like, or meditation or astrology or anything like that, tarot or channeling for that matter. There can be something that you can develop here as in a very deliberate way, especially with that Uranus in the 5th. So you, with the Uranus trining to Pluto, which is in your 1st house, you are changing significantly. And there's a part of you that is changing because of this new way of expressing yourself, and that will be reinforced. So after 2 years of transforming yourself, you get this insight and this inspiration that comes from Uranus saying, be you, do you. I have this t-shirt from Plum Village which says, be beautiful, be yourself. So that's this. And we've got Venus in the 6th house with Jupiter, speaking of beauty. And Venus is ruling that Mars up in the 9th house. So there's something about your everyday experience, your everyday activities or your job, your health, even your way of showing up every day, that is also inspired or inspiring that Mars in the 9th house, which is now feels like it's on a mission. I have this idea, I have this mission, I want to do this thing, I have to learn these things, I have to motivate to improve myself. Mars, when it's in the 9th house, is on this kind of wave of self-improvement. And that can be really helpful for your health, especially with Venus in the 6th. It can be really helpful in terms of the quality of your everyday life, in terms of the work that you do. And then Mars rules your 10th. And so whatever this is going to contribute to how you show up in the world or in your career, with superiors or with social hierarchy that is going to see you in this new way, in this slightly more enlightened way, potentially. Your ruler Saturn is in the 3rd house with Neptune, and it's part of this dynamic in terms of a quincunx or an inconjunct to the new moon in Virgo. And so there's something here that maybe you're not yet comfortable saying, or there's been agreements that may have been broken, or you've been let down, especially with that Neptune there, a let down by a friend or sibling or cousin or something like that. And you're contemplating what it is that's next, and maybe questioning your role in it. Mercury's in the 7th house, so there's something that is available to you in terms of speaking, communicating, connecting with the other. And as your ruler is retrograding in a sextile to Pluto in your 1st house, it's part of how you're restructuring yourself, and maybe around your local space or around your communications, what you promise, what you do, what is the distinction between what you promise and what you deliver, for example, your short-term goals versus your long-term goals, where Mars is in the 9th house, or vision, let's say your vision. And as they are backing up into the 2nd house, it may be that you need to go back in and re-explore your values, or re-explore what's available to you in terms of your resources before you finalize this, before you move into the next thing. So by the time of the eclipses that come up in September, from the 1st of September, your ruler is back in your 2nd house, then ruled by this Jupiter in the 6th house. So things to do with your values, money, etc., are going to affect you day to day for a long time to come, because that's going to be really until February, where Saturn then finally moves back into the 3rd. So interesting times, Aquarius, of course, as you already know. See you in the next video. Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Rising. This is the axis that you are familiar with because Virgo is on the other side of the table from you, and this is where the new moon is. And there's an agitation or a change around what is home, family, mother, connections to your family lineage, family of origin, to land, property, etc. So something new here, except that there's this new way of relating to the other that is coming from either insight or a need to adjust, a need because there's disruption around the home front or around the quality of mother, the question of the dynamic around what makes you feel safe and secure. This unsettled feeling can be challenged, but it's coming through, or let's say the response to it will be through relationships and new ways of relating. As you've got this new moon in your seventh house of relationships, it's ruled by Mercury in the house of service in the sixth house, which is resonant with Mercury, with Virgo, ruled by that Mercury. And Mercury in the sixth is representing also health, healing, work, communication around those things, learning about them, teaching about them, maybe siblings and the way you have to engage with siblings around this time or with friends around this time on those topics. Mercury is ruling that Uranus, the fourth house, as well as the seventh house. So it's a big player at this time. And it will move into your seventh house on the 2nd of September. And that's just after Saturn moves back into your first house. So there's a very clear dynamic that is inviting you to take a responsible role towards yourself, whether it be about self-care or the position that you need to take to step up into something that is about relationship, into something that might be new in the context of relationship. And of course, ongoingly through these last couple of months and the next couple of months, Saturn and Uranus are also with Neptune in a sextile. And then also there's a trine back to that Pluto and a sextile from Saturn, Neptune to Pluto in your 12th house of ancestors, of foreigners, foreign lands, people far away, things that you can't see with the eyes open. You have to close your eyes to see them, or they're behind closed doors, or they're so far away that you know they're there, but you don't know in what form. For example, the connection with people at a distance, and all of that is changing quite dramatically, including your interior experience of spirit or your relationship to spirit, which is changing dramatically at this time. And Saturn rules that. So when Saturn moves back into your first house, as of the 1st of, so just a week from this new moon, that is going to be emphasized even more strongly. So the direct role that you're playing. And then, of course, I'll come back and tell you more about the eclipse cycle because the next eclipse is happening in your first house at 15 degrees. So we'll talk more about that for the 7th of September. Your exaltation, your ruler, Jupiter, and your exaltation ruler, Venus, are in the 5th house and trinal to you. So it feels like you're very lucky, you're very blessed. Things are coming through in a way that are working out in your favor. Pisces is a mutable sign. So is Gemini. All of the angles are mutable. So is Virgo, but it's an earth sign, so a little bit less flexible on the mutability. And then, of course, your 10th house of career is about mutability as well in Sagittarius. And Jupiter is ruling career. It rules yourself. And Mercury rules the other two houses. So Mercury rules Virgo, rules Gemini. So this quality of the moment, this moment is really up your alley. It's a time to be flexible, to receive and to work through that sense of what is more in your in this dynamic of shifting the inner life to expose something new in the outer life in terms of the emotions, in terms of the psychological self, and then how that can reconnect you to people through new ways of being in relationship. That can be business partners as well, new dynamics around business partners, but most especially it can be your most special partner, your life partner, or dear friends, for example. But it's the quality of relationship overall, quality of relationship. And with Mercury there in the 6th, both connecting to the fourth house and to the seventh house. There's this aspect of being of service. And so the higher quality of that Leo is service from the heart, as opposed to service from the ego. And that will always be the way that you can feel your way forward into tolerating the extra demands that might be put on you, because Saturn in the second, it's the second house is the house of family and the house of whatever supports you. And when Saturn is in the second house, there's not much support. And Chiron is also there, Neptune is also there. So you're having to learn how to support yourself. This is a new way of supporting yourself. And it's not so easy to rely on others, especially as Mars is also in the eighth house of what you receive from others. And Mars is saying, you got to work for this. This is not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of compromise, or not going to get it. So not in this moment, not in this format. So the abundance is coming, but it's coming to you, through you, in such a way that you can let go of the need to wait for somebody else to bring it to you. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Good luck, Pisces. Let's see you in the next video. So Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. You've still got this, of course, Saturn and Neptune in your first house to contend with, as well as Chiron. And there's an interesting quincunx, or an inconjunct, so an uncomfortable aspect between that Saturn Neptune in the first into the second degree of your sign, and into the first degree of your sixth house of service, where we find this new moon in Virgo. And this notion of service, of being on duty, let's say, being there for work. There may be something that challenges you. You're not quite ready for it, or you're not sensing what your role is there. Mercury is ruling the new moon, as well as your third house of siblings, communication, extended family, the local space around you, and your short-term goals, your sense of willpower. And here Mercury is committed to a sense of what I want, how I want to express it, my creative output. So actually really supportive in terms of you bringing forth something that you really want to see in your everyday life, in terms of your work, in terms of how you want to show up for others, overcome things that might require some, new way, a new way of showing up to deal with things that you have to grapple with. It's the sixth house is the kind of frustrating things of day-to-day practicalities, but where you get great benefits when you do show up and take care of them. And with Uranus in the third house, that is part of this disruption to your everyday life. Third house is also about how you go about your everyday life, how the people in your everyday life, or the things you have to do every day, the places you have to go every day, there's a certain amount of newness or disruption that you're already experiencing. And then this new moon is saying, okay, now let's go here in this new direction. This will be a part of this cycle, let's say 6 to 8 weeks, of the better part of August and September. And so that's the eclipse dynamic as well at this time. So it's a really good idea to bring this to your conscious awareness and really become clear how you want to do your work. How do you every day? How do you support yourself through what you do every day? You might have found that you have actually a better sense of potential or capacity at this time, because you have Jupiter and Venus in your fourth house. So you might be feeling pretty good about yourself, pretty solid. You might be feeling a real benefit in terms of family support, family dynamics, or where you feel at home, where you're finding comfort around what home represents to you right now. And Venus rules your second house of family, as well as the earnings that you can have, or the possessions and the values that you have. So there's something linked to either home or homeland, potentially working from home. Another way that this can show up, especially as your ruler of the 10th is in your first house. So Saturn is in your first house, and rules also the Pluto that's in your 11th house, which is changing your relationship to society and also changing your gains from what you do. So much change here for you. And also your ruler Mars is across the table from you in Libra. And that is can be testy. It can be that somebody is coming at you with some attitude, or that you need to put more effort out into relationship. More compromise might be required based on other people expressing their needs, or you recognizing this is your need of the moment. Certainly, Chiron in your first house is squaring Venus in your fourth house, so you might be recognizing where you might be struggling because of self-sabotage or attitudes towards yourself, especially with that Saturn in Aries as well, where you may not be recognizing your full value. And that can make you feel a little clumsy in relationship. And with Mars in Libra, there may be a sense that the other might be the problem, but you might want to question that. You might want to look into how you're feeling about yourself, because we're looking at, Venus ruling the house of value from the fourth house, cozy there with Jupiter. And how you feel about yourself will determine how you relate to others, for example. So Venus rules your seventh house of the other as well. So that's that. I hope that's helpful. I will see you again for the eclipse dynamic, which is, so this sixth house of service and health and every day is going to be part of this horizon for a long time to come. And we'll come back to look at the eclipse of the 7th of September very soon, and we'll get a feel of that one as well. Okay, Aries, see you in the next video. Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Rising. Your ruler, Venus, is in the third house with Jupiter. You've just had this wonderful conjunction less than 2 weeks before this lunation. And that can make you feel really uplifted and positive, having new, stronger connections in terms of your friends, your extended family, how you're communicating with people, what your everyday life feels like. There's an improvement that you're feeling now, especially since the, say, 9, 10, 11, 12th of August. That's really boosting you at this time, because especially up until that point, the Saturn, Neptune with Chiron in your 12th, you may have been pretty down in the dumps and feeling this sense of lacking connection or misfiring around spirit, misfiring around trust in God, misfiring around your sense of the connection that you might have to your unconscious. There may have been some anxiety, tensions, worries in that sense. Uranus is in your second house, which represents family and money, and it is ruled by this Mercury in the fourth house. Second house is whatever supports you, and that Mercury in the fourth house is suggesting that it is this connection to your family, your lineage, your roots, your the family you've created, your family of origin, property, nationhood, etc. That is partly where you're finding your support. And also the Mercury in the fourth is supporting your fifth house of your connection to your children, to your connection to your creative output, your creative expectations, or your projects that you're developing. The notions of expressing yourself just as you are, that's also part of this dynamic. Definitely listen to the introduction. So one of the reasons that Taurus is very conservative and a wee bit shy is because Virgo is on the fifth house. And so there's a lot of self-criticism about what the output is like. And of course, that depends on your natal chart, but the dynamic there with Virgo on the fifth house can block you from being fully creative. And this can be an opportunity where you say, enough of that. The South Node is in the fifth, and this new moon is generating this new vision for how you reach out into your self-expression and creativity, how you connect with your children, or the idea of having children, or if it's not around biological children or even adopted ones, it's about projects that you might consider to be your babies that you're creating. The tension is coming from the inner experience, the anxiety or the issues that are coming through ancestral or spiritual frustrations or anxieties. The 12th house can be around loss financially or death, endings of all kinds. So this can be also part of the dynamic that holds you back from creating or not being clear. And this will be the instigator for this fresh new thing that is really emerging over the month of August and September, and especially around the eclipse cycle, 7th and 21st of September, which is very much in this axis. So there's a new vision for your life with the North Node in the 11th, and it's coming from this everyday connection or your change or more positive attitude, let's say. How your mind is operating, that's the third house, how you communicate with other people, how you connect and allow support coming from other people. Mars is in your sixth house of health and healing, ruling that 12th house of self-undoing, confinement, and so on. And so there's something that requires your action, that you need to take action on. That also it might be something that you are dealing with in terms of a health crisis that is about inflammation. It might be about something to do with the liver, for example. Venus and Venus and Libra ruling the liver, the emunctory parts of the body, the things that deal with it's the post-digestive processing of things. So the taking the best out of what you get. It's after Virgo does the pre-selection and takes the nutrients and so on, then the quality of the Mars now in your sixth house in Venus ruled sign in Libra is really about what to do with it now. Where do we put it? How we utilize that. So if there is something that you're working with that has to do with your liver or the filtration system or the lymph system or how you utilize blood sugar or those kinds of things, do take action on it, because we can see with the Saturn across the way with Neptune and Chiron there too, that there might be something that you need to take more seriously or do differently. Right. And of course, Pluto is at the top of your chart. That is a very significant change in the way that you show up in the world in general. And very, very powerful, as it has been for 2 years now, even more so because it's trined by Uranus in your second house of values and money and self-worth and family ties and so on, and then also in a sextile by the Saturn Neptune, and that holds for a long time. I've spoken about that a lot. We'll talk about it a lot more. So good luck with this. I will see you in the next video. Gemini, this is happening in your fourth house of home, family, lineage, your people, your land, your property. So it's house and home, but also hearth and home. Your lineage in terms of your family of origin and also the family that you're creating. Something new here. And so maybe there's an urge or a desire to be more ready, more available, more into this dynamic around family, around home, around nation, friends, siblings, etc. play a huge role, because we've got Mercury, your ruler, in the third house, and it's tying into that fourth house where it also is the ruler. And something about the way you connect, the way you communicate, the way you are reaching into sibling dynamics is really powerful at this time. It's going to influence what is going on in this new cycle. It will feel a lot more productive, let's say, from the 2nd of September, once Mercury moves into your fourth house. So then it's going to be squaring Uranus very, very powerfully, as this moon is doing, and much more sort of, let's do this thing. Let's, I feel the change is there. I want this to be different. Of course you do, because you've got Uranus there in the first degree of your first house, moving into the second degree. And this is in a square to that moon. So whatever it is that you feel needs to change about yourself, or that is being, you're feeling itchy about wanting to change, it's going to influence this fourth house for quite some time. And this is kind of like a new spark, a new way of showing up there. It's also about what makes you feel secure, emotionally, psychologically, materially. And you've got Jupiter and Venus in your second house, which is the house of money, possessions, what you do with all of that stuff. And it also represents family. So there seems to be something that brings you a sense of security at this time. Beware also that Venus and Jupiter together in your second house, which will depend on your natal chart, but that can cause you to spend a lot of money as well, which you may or may not want to do. It's part of a dynamic that you should at least become aware of. So it's at least spending for a good reason, because you've got a Mars in the house of investments and gambling, which is not in good dignity, and it's ruled by that Venus. So don't gamble away your money. Even if Mars is trinal to you, there can be an impulsiveness or doing something based on what might suit others, but it's not good for you, for example. So use your discernment. Your ruler in the third house might have you feeling quite agitated and really all fired up to do stuff. But it may not be the moment just to take action at this time. So you're strategizing and feeling your way forward as much as you can. Saturn, Neptune in the 11th house are on the verge of backing into your 10th house, especially after the 1st of September. Saturn will be in your 10th house. And that will also remind you of what your overall sense of mission is in terms of your career or taking responsibility for family, a role of parenting, the role that you play with reference to your parents, because the fourth house also represents your family, but also especially the mother. And the 10th house is the parents too. In many cases, it can be an authority figure like the father. I also see the 9th house as representing the father in the Indian way. I find that worth looking at as well. And that's where we have Pluto in the 9th house. So the dynamics around who advises you, who leads you, who teaches you are changing quite rapidly. And so this will have an effect on the new feeling that you're looking for as you establish this new foundation, or as you recognize there's a need to ground yourself in something. One of the challenges of the dynamic of Gemini is this feeling of being ungrounded and too much outward directed activity, especially as you've got Mars in the 5th in the air sign Jupiter in Libra. And you might not be feeling terribly grounded at this time. But this is where the emphasis should be put with the new moon in Virgo. It will really benefit you to do that with the vision, the long-term vision of that North Node in Pisces. So we'll come back and look at that as we go forward into the days ahead. I'll come back with a little bit of insights into the 7th of September eclipse, which is happening in your 10th house. So you're establishing something now that creates a foundation for yourself that ideally is going to make you feel secure and solid, bring happiness, or at least realize what you need to be happy, what you need to feel secure. And then you are going to operate based on what you recognize is how you're showing up in the world. And do those two things line up? Is that lining up with the values that I now realize I hold, or that I'm paying more attention to right now? Or my own self-worth, my value, the value that I have in terms of possessions, income, and so on and so on. All right, Gemini, so make the most of that. Big time for change for you, because this is all quadrant houses. That means that that's like the backbone of your life that is really quite dynamically changing. Good luck. Cancer, this is, of course, the ruler of Cancer. The lunation, whatever form it's taking, is always very important for Cancer because you're ruled by the moon. And this is happening in your 3rd house of communications, siblings, your willpower, how you use it, how you reach out into community, or especially around your local space. Extended family potentially as well. 3rd house is about skills, pragmatic skills, how you can use them. This is one of the reasons that Cancer is quite pragmatic and quite good at the everyday stuff. It's because Virgo is on the 3rd house, and quite skillful in terms of the everyday stuff that needs to be done. And that depends on your Mercury. But still, this is where you want to be putting some of your attention. It could be also about a teaching or writing or communications project. It might have something to do with working online or working because Venus, which is ruling your 11th house of the sort of audience or the internet, or how you reach out into dynamics around networking. That is, we have Venus there in your 1st house of self. We've just had Venus meeting up with Jupiter in your 1st house. So that was a direct blessing to Cancer. Very, very powerful. And now with the moon, a new moon in the place where we're going to have these eclipses really highlighted through the month of September. Really for several weeks, we're going to be feeling this. And as Cancer is ruled by the moon, you will be feeling this massive change. Something to do with your writing or teaching or communication skills can be changing or revitalized or have a renewed sense of purpose. And especially because you're putting that out there where that North Node is in terms of a higher vision for your life. Issues around faith, what you believe in, how you're guided by that, how you're guided by your life philosophy, how you connect with teachers, overall that's part of this axis over the next few weeks. And so that third house can be an awareness of, okay, what practical skills do I need? Or how do I need to learn this thing or teach this thing or communicate this thing? How do I need to connect with people around me in my local space or with my siblings or with my friends, my coffee pals or my golf buddies or whatever the thing is? And how does that need to show up differently? Third house, third house. Third house is also the connection that you have to your everyday activity. And as Jupiter's in your first house, it rules also the sixth house, which is also aligned with that notion of activity every day and what you're doing every day. This could be a really good time with Jupiter, and especially Jupiter Venus in your first house, to ask yourself, am I taking care of myself sufficiently, and should I change the way I show up every day? Do I need to change the way that I organize my time? Travel, issues around travel can play into that. Am I doing too much of that? Am I doing things in not necessarily too much, but in the wrong way? Could I be more efficient around that? Remember, Virgo is about being pragmatic and efficient. Now, Mars is in your fourth house of home. So there's a lot of awareness or attention around that topic. Venus is ruling that from your first house. So you're personally implicated in this, that you need to do something about this. And it shows up in terms of what happens, of how you operate out in the world. And that can reference parents, it can reference your career, your vocation, your sense of what you're aiming for or hoping to achieve. And with that Mars in the fourth, there can be energy that requires some kind of adjustment as part of also the quality here with this the new moon in Virgo squared by Uranus in the 12th, where there's some insights that might be coming either from a spiritual understanding of something or an inner unconscious awareness of something, especially as that's being supported by Pluto in the 8th house, bringing up a lot of um, unconscious things or natural gifts and abilities for around intuition. This, by the way, will heighten your intuition. New moon in the third house with the south node can also really change your mind, how your mind literally operates, how it's working. And with Mercury in your second house as well, this could be how you're communicating around that, the words that you choose or the values that you're thinking through, how you're working based on those values. And that includes the rulership of your 12th house, your spiritual values being translated into the everyday communication, for example. Or with that Mars in the fourth house, again, there can be some issues around home, something that needs to be dealt with, needs to be fixed, it needs to be taken care of in that Mars-like way, which is about taking action or letting something go or separating. I wouldn't say there's conflict because Venus is quite strong here, looked after by this third house moon, and the moon is in its joy in the third house. So I don't think this Mars is necessarily about conflict, or it could be an inner conflict, maybe with reference to a restlessness around your unconscious or your sense of what you need to be secure, feel secure. Mars is ruling your 10th house, and it also is ruling your 5th house of children. So that's going to be whatever it is that's going on around home or around the foundation of your life is also going to affect your connection to your creative output or your children, how you express your happiness. And the 10th house quality, where we find Saturn, Neptune changing your sense of your higher vision for your career or your ambition, you could call it, your aims for your career. So interesting times, to say the least, for all of us, of course. But you've got a huge blessing in the form of Jupiter and Venus in your first house, which makes it a lot easier to cope with the Saturn Neptune in your 10th house. And so you'll get there, but possibly not really directly understanding it until after this eclipse cycle is finished. And especially in September, when you clarify your purpose here with the moon on the north node in your 9th house, trinal to Jupiter, which it already is pushing into. So very, very supportive time, I'd say, for your vision and practically living through the vision. All right. So good luck with that, Cancer. I'll see you in the next video. And Leo, we're going to end with you today. Thanks for waiting. And we've got Mercury in your first house. It's been retrograding there in July and August. And now it's on the 11th of August at 4 degrees of your sign. It's stationed direct. And now Mercury is moving really fast. And it's ruling this moon, this new moon, which is in your second house of earned income, the money that you have at your disposal, your own gifts and talents that you can bring to the table, your resources in a general sense, possessions and so on, but also especially family. And this could have something to do with siblings. We've got Mars in your house of siblings and extended family, cousins, friends, local friends and stuff like that. And then of course Uranus is in your 11th house, which can be around an elder sibling, and it can be around also the way you're connecting socially with people or your vision for your future, really, really changing. And we see that in a number of different ways. Um, how you're showing up is in this moment in time, August, September, going to benefit from a reflection or a renewal of your sense of value. So the second house is your value, your own self-worth, as well as your values and what you find valuable, where you put your attention in terms of your values. So Saturn, Neptune have been in your ninth house of what you believe, what you have faith in, what you find is your purpose, trinal to you, which is very supportive. And but it's an inconjunct to this. So it may be that you're still working out what your values are, you're still working out your sense of self-worth. Leo, despite the anecdotes, despite the characterization of Leo, is often really lacking in a sense of self-worth. And it can tend to then over-exaggerate the persona because of this insecurity around self-worth, and or there's an extreme shyness, or there's an extreme sort of self-deprecating quality that doesn't allow the Leo to shine. So this is where your invitation is to really let go of doubts around your value, or this fussiness around how you are, that might be self-judgmental. So this could be a good way of seeing that, especially as Mercury from your first house, where you are invited to really communicate about yourself or your ideas or what it is that you want to achieve, etc. That is actually moving into your second house, where we find the new moon today, and that will be the 2nd of September. So you're building up to something that you can actually feel more practical about, and you want to really think about, with the Mercury sort of way of reflecting on these things, think about your value, what you value, think about the earned income that you have. You've got Uranus in the 11th, which is about gains from what you do, as well as how you connect with society and your vision for your future. So really put a lot of your self-worth in your attention field for this time, so that you really recognize what it is you're bringing to the table. And again, it's more in the Leo heartfelt way as opposed to the Leo ego way. Not as a way of gaining attention, but as a way of expressing yourself directly. You've got Jupiter in your 12th house, connecting you to spirit or ancestors, or a deeper awareness of your internal experience of life, your unconscious. And it's ruling the 5th house of how you express yourself, as well as the 8th house of what you recognize as your kind of underlying psychological framework. And you've got the North Node there. So that's where the axis of the eclipses will be in September. We'll come back and talk more about that. And so Jupiter, Venus in your 12th house is actually a really beautiful blessing. It could literally represent also connecting with somebody from abroad, falling in love with somebody from abroad, whether you're a man or a woman. As you've got both of the karakas for relationships, you've got Jupiter and Venus there representing relationships. So that could very well be. And then Venus glides into your first house just a couple of days after this. So you will also have that glow up that Venus brings when she comes into Leo in your first house. And that might bring you a little extra dose of confidence in terms of your second house and how you work forward into this vision that you're having for you in the relationship to the second house qualities that I enumerated. So of course, Pluto is in your 7th house of relationship. That's a big part of this moment in time for you. So the dynamics around friends, friendships, life partners, business partners, and all of that is huge at this time. And that is contingent on your sense of your self-worth, what you feel is the value of money, the color of money, as it were. And then Saturn, Neptune in your 9th house is still kind of trying to figure out, what is this new me? What is this new purpose? And it will certainly be more visionary than it has been for a while, because that Neptune will create some insights around your more spiritual vision. And with the constructive quality of Saturn as well, it can help to make that more grounded. Right, I think I've said it all. And of course, your ruler, the sun, is actually in the second house. So that puts a lot of emphasis on what I just said. It's really extra emphasis. And Mercury is being ruled by your ruler, the sun, and Mercury is ruling your sun, the ruler, your sun. And that means that there's a cooperative element between you and how you take action based on your values, or based on income, based on how you connect with your family, what brings you support. And this might even be about literally, how your day-to-day, that sort of Virgoan quality of how you use your time, is that working for you or not? That's one way of looking at that. You may be, because of that South Node, you may be letting go of an aspect of this. You may be ready to let go, and you may already have been ready to let that go because it's been there since January, but this will emphasize that, especially in September. All right, I'll be back with more updates. Thank you for watching and subscribing and liking and doing all the things that we have to ask you to do, even though I know you're perfectly capable of figuring that out for yourself. So thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next video.